It was the early 90s. As usual, I, a small third grader, was sent to my grandparents' village for the summer. It wasn't a bad place, considering it was in the far north. Anyone who's been deep in the Arkhangelsk region will understand. Old wooden houses, 2 and even 3 stories tall, a big yard, cows, chickens. The village sat on the bank of a river near the mouth of the White Sea. Beyond that, for 250 kilometers, there was nothing but wilderness. True, untouched wilderness. But I loved going there. There were no computers back then, and here I could run around with the local kids, sleep in, and watch funny Yeltsin clips and grandma's soap operas on my TV. My grandparents were well off by village standards, thrifty, self-sufficient, always helping others. Grandpa, in particular, lived like a king. He had a snowmobile and a motorboat, luxuries few collective farmers could afford. He was a real man, with a capital M, massive, broad-shouldered, sinewy, his black and white beard framing a booming bass voice. Despite being in his 80s, he seemed unbreakable. His eyes were gone, taken by the Fritzes in the war. On holidays, he wore his jacket like a New Year's tree, medals gleaming all over. A warrior, like Odin the One-Eyed. He was always singing, always joking. That summer, as usual, Grandpa decided to head to his hut in the taiga and took me along to teach me the ways of the land, how to fish, how to get snares. We left in the morning, loading up the boat with supplies. Grandma packed us food. It was a long trip, a full day's journey. The weather was perfect, and the river kept the mosquitoes away. Grandpa, as always, cracked jokes, this time about some meaty trinkets I should have ready when I met the girl of my dreams. He got carried away with it. I would have preferred stories about the war, but he never talked about that. Too young to know those horrors, he would say. The banks were empty, untouched by people. Only the occasional stray barrel or drifting logs hinted that others had ever passed this way. By evening, we approached a large, steep bend in the river. On the high bank, there were old ruins, evidence that someone had lived there long ago. Grandpa grew tense and warned that this place was dangerous. It was called Dark Navalok. As if on cue, the weather shifted, the sky darkened, and a light drizzle began. The clouds rushed in, and the water started to rock the boat. I was small and did not know how to swim well, and was terrified. I clung to Grandpa, begging him to dock. Grandpa did not say anything, and just increased the motor speed. The wind picked up, and the boat rocked violently. Water splashed into the bottom. I started to cry. A feeling of emptiness washed over me, and an unexplainable fear settled in. Grandpa, though he looked calm, seemed different. He seemed not quite himself. After a moment, he stopped trying to push forward and steered the boat toward the shore. We needed shelter from the rain and wind, and thankfully, a slanted barn appeared in the distance. Grandpa seemed openly uneasy now. His one eye darted around, and his hands trembled. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. We tied the boat up and headed for the barn. Inside, there was almost nothing, just old nets, empty cans, and a rusty shovel. Outside, the storm raged on. Grandpa spread out a tarpaulin and took out a thermos to pour tea, but his hands were shaking. I was seriously worried. I asked him what was wrong, but he mumbled something about a cursed place. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, utter exhaustion, and he said he felt unwell, that he would take a nap and we would continue once the weather calmed down. He placed the loaded gun beside me and told me not to go anywhere, to wake him if anything happened. After some time, I felt a strange, overwhelming fatigue. I tried to stay awake, but eventually I drifted into a strange, deep sleep. When I woke up, it took me a moment to realize something was wrong. The storm had stopped and it was night. Grandpa was still lying where he had been. I tried to wake him, but he was not breathing. Panic hit me hard. I was terrified, alone in the taiga at night with Grandpa unresponsive. Summoning every ounce of courage that I had, I decided to search for help. I grabbed the gun and headed to the boat, trying to stay alert in case of wolves or something else appeared. That's when I noticed something strange. The air felt different. The sky had a strange crimson glow. The river was still, completely motionless. There was a burning smell in the air, and everything sounded wrong, like a nightmare. Looking up at the top of the bank, I saw a wooden church. I could swear it had not been there during the day. The light was on inside. I ran toward it, dropping the gun. As I got closer, I heard voices. People were praying. I opened the door and saw a group of people. Women, children, old men and women. They paid no attention to me. Their eyes were fixed on the icon as they prayed. They looked strange, like people from an old family photo of my grandmother's. The women wore headscarves and dresses, the children wore shirts, and the men wore black zip-ons. I asked for help, but no one responded. 2 women came up to me and took my hands, while the men locked the door behind me. I screamed that my grandfather needed help, but they did not listen. They led me to the icon and told me to pray. The words had a strange, hypnotic effect on me. I don't know why, but I began to mumble about Jesus, even though I had never read the Bible. I forgot about my grandfather and slipped into a strange trance. The women and old women spoke about how we would all go to paradise, that God was waiting for us, and that the Antichrist would not take our souls. I did not understand what was happening, and I did not want to. Their prayers slowly turned into sobs as they kept praying. Then, suddenly, there was a deathly silence. The door of the church was being pounded on, and with each strike, it grew louder. I had no idea who was outside, but it terrified me. Women and children screamed in hysteria. The men stood frozen. Suddenly, one of them grabbed a candle and threw it into a pile of hay in the corner. The room ignited immediately. No one ran. Everyone watched as the fire spread. It dawned on me that they had decided to burn themselves and me alive. I considered running, but the women had a tight grip on me. The fire was getting closer, and people began to burn, screaming wildly. Meanwhile, the door struggled to stay intact from the force of blows on the outside. I was overcome with an almost inhuman fear. The fire, the smoke, these strange people who had chosen to burn themselves, and the real Antichrist was breaking into the church. I was slipping into unconsciousness. Then, the door to the room was smashed open, and a huge, unrecognizable figure emerged from the fire and smoke. Through my tear-filled eyes, I saw he was holding a massive axe, and he was heading straight toward me. His hand swung back for a blow, and I closed my eyes, ready for death. But then there was a sudden strike, followed by something splashing. The numbness faded, and I opened my eyes to see the lifeless bodies of the old women who had been holding me. Turning my head, I saw a man covered in soot, his one-eyed, burned face twisted in rage, holding a bloody shovel. It was my grandfather. He grabbed me by the armpits, pressing me to his chest, and rushed out of the church, swinging the shovel at the burning people around us. A roar filled the air. Antichrist, Antichrist. The ring of possessed people was closing in. Grandpa fought fiercely, his shovel crushing bones and his powerful curses echoing in the chaos. We managed to escape the church, and Grandpa ran with me toward the shore. After that, I don't remember anything. I woke up in the hospital at the district center. The nurse told me I had carbon monoxide poisoning and burns in my respiratory tract. Fishermen found me in a boat 50 kilometers away from Navalok, unconscious and covered by a tarpaulin. A few days later, they found my grandfather, half lying, half sitting in the same spot where I had left him before heading to the barn. There was no church, only long, overgrown charred logs remained. The police from the district center did not believe my story about Navalok, and never did my parents. They chalked it up to shock. The only ones who seemed to understand were the local officer and the fishermen who found me. They crossed themselves. We took my grandmother with us from the village and buried my grandfather. When I was older, my grandmother, near death, told me a story about how, in the 1920s, NKVD officers had tried to force the local old believers out of the taiga and civilize them. The people had resisted and locked themselves in their church, choosing to burn themselves alive, believing that the Antichrist had arrived on Earth. After the fire was put out and the ashes cleared, they found one barely alive child. It was my grandfather. I'm really glad you wrote this down because it reminded me that one of my friends had a pretty similar experience. Here is the story. Be my friend. In high school in Homer, Alaska in the 1980s. Being kind of friends with this weird girl in class. She keeps talking about how her brother's double is so annoying. What? Ask her if she means his twin. Does he have a twin? She says no. She means his double. Proceeds to tell my friend about how she sees her brother in two places at once and also interacts with them. Like, she walks into the kitchen and her brother is there eating cereal. Then she walks into the living room through the only pathway and there is her brother watching TV. She says she can talk to both of them and they behave similarly, although the double only appears at her house. Only difference is that the double likes playing pranks. Apparently, the double likes to hide in weird places like her closet or in kitchen cabinets or under the couch and jump out and scare her. My friend is thoroughly what the fucking at this point. He also does not believe her at all and thinks it's complete bullshit because this girl is totally into spirits and Ouija and is almost talking about communing with the dead and third eyes and other stuff that makes her story suspect. Plus, she's told him a lot of other ghost stories at this point and they all sounded like total bullshit. But this one is different because she is not scared and she did not frame it as a ghost story or even a cult. It was just part of her life. Flash forward like 20 years. Currently living in WA. Travel back to Homer for some family event. I don't remember what he said. At the Anchorage airport, my friend runs into that girl's brother. They recognize each other from high school and catch up a bit, and he learns that the brother is also coming into town to visit and that his sister will also be there. Say goodbye to each other after they collect baggage, and my friend makes a note to look up that girl he was friends with in high school, since she will actually be in town. Get to Homer after a several-hour drive. The next day, he goes to her house to say hi. Very small town. He remembered where her folks lived. They catch up, since they have not really talked since high school. My friend casually mentions that he saw her brother at the airport and asked if he was busy and when he would be coming back. The girl looks at him, all confused. Huh? Explains that her brother is coming to visit, but that he won't be here for another 3 days because it was hard finding a flight from CO and back. What? My friend suddenly remembers all that shit this girl told him about her brother's double back in high school. Shit bricks. After that, I think they talked about it for a bit, and the girl said that she had not seen the double since high school and had kind of forgotten about it, but seemed to take it in stride and find it funny, and said something like, "Glad to hear he's still kicking around up here." Nothing else happened regarding that, but kinda a lot like your story. Let me tell you about the time a weird old man spent an afternoon with me and my family. Not paranormal really, and it has no punchline, but it will keep the thread bumped at least. 12 years old at the time, raised out in the sticks, tiny property surrounded by an old wooden fence. There is a country road that runs along the fence for about a mile. Dad and I are outside doing some work one day when we see someone coming down the road. We never see anyone traveling down this road, much less on foot. As the traveler gets closer, we see it's a very old man. He's limping along, carrying a leather satchel on his shoulder. Dad calls out to him, invites him in for lunch. Dad never does this with strangers, but whatever. I don't question my elders. Old man follows me and my dad into the house. Mom serves cornbread and honey, and we eat in a really awkward silence for a while. Then the old man drops his leather satchel onto the table. He begins to tell us a weird story while we eat. Says he's a root worker, what people in my parts called a power man from up north. Says he's been traveling several weeks, pursued by something. I assume he means an animal has been hunting him, but it becomes clear he's talking about some kind of spirit. He calls it a thing. Claims that this thing has been moving west along the Appalachian Trail, more or less, following him. A month ago, he stayed with a family in North Carolina, he says. Slept overnight in their barn. The next morning, the family's oldest son was found seemingly strangled in his bed. The family thought the old man had something to do with it. They chased him off the property, but somehow, the old man managed to escape, with a limp. The whole story seems incredibly suspicious to me, but I am 12 at the time, so what do I know, right? The old man says It wasn't me that killed the boy, like he's reading my thoughts. Claims that this thing that's been following him was responsible for the boy's death. So far, this fella isn't sounding like much of a power man to me, lol, but mom and dad appear to believe every word he says. Even dad, who hates people and is very intense, seems really relaxed around this guy. The old man reaches into his leather satchel, leaves his hand in there. I shoot a glance at dad. No reaction. Feeling very nervous, but decide to just keep my trap shut. Dad was not averse to beating my ass if I interrupted adults talking, cack. Anyway, the old man goes on. Says the thing that's following him, whatever it is going to pass through our farm next. He wants to pray with us to keep it from harming us. Parents agree. The old man pulls his hand out of his satchel and reaches for my hand. I'm sitting next to him. Now we are all holding hands around the table. He begins to pray. The prayer is in French, which is weird. But even weirder, his hand starts to get really hot. It feels like when you touch the outside of a hot toaster. By the time the old man is finishing his prayer, his hand is starting to seriously burn. He concludes his prayer, says that we should all be safe, but that we need to be careful for the next few days. We are still holding hands at this point, and I notice his hand is now noticeably cool. Then he grabs his satchel and gets up, says he's going to move on to the next place to warn the next family. We follow him outside. The three of us watch as he limps down the road. I remember wondering what the fuck he kept in that fucking satchel. 2 days later, one of our cows dies suddenly. No obvious cause, just killed over in the field. Otherwise, life goes on as normal. The end. Abnormal from the start. Used to be a lot of mining in the area. I figure it fell into one too many tailless piles. So, I was sitting in my tree stand like a true fat ass. Skinny as fuck, but whatever. Deer hunting. It was getting late, and probably past the legal quitting time, but I was hoping that I might see something before it got too dark. I had a Winchester Model 70 in .270. I hated that gun. Its back sight was folding, and tended to fold down when I needed it the most. That does not factor into the story. It's just annoying as fuck. Caused me to miss a nice deer once. Location is northern Wisconsin, near the UP border. I am on my uncle's land, and my tree stand is overlooking a small pond that is currently frosted over. The ice is thick. We had run a 4x4 on it a few weeks ago, and it had not warmed up since. Night is falling, and as I think about a warm Irish coffee waiting for me back in the cabin, the bushes start to rustle. I tense up, hoping it's a deer, though hauling it out at this time and in the cold would fucking suck. Out of the bushes stumbles this coyote. It was the biggest fucking coyote I had ever seen. Not as big as a wolf, but large German shepherd sized. Not bulky though, skinny and long, really long. It looks at me, right fucking at me, and screams. The scream nearly set my ears ringing. It was so loud. The sound was metallic, like in the movies when a sub goes too deep. That metal bending and tearing sound, not organic at all. I had already planned to kill it. It was late enough that I knew I would not be able to get a deer, and coyotes are a massive issue for my uncle, as they kill his chickens and sheep. As I began to place the crosshairs on the fuckers, it fell over onto its side and screamed again. The ice cracked when it fell and hit the ice, a loud bang as the crack spread. I felt the tree shake. In the north, when serious ice cracks, it can cause minor earthquakes, break windows, and drop shells. This ice was not that thick, but I still felt the tree move. The coyote was on its side, twitching and gyrating. It then started to move onto its belly, and it got up on its hind legs. It looked right at me and screamed. My ears were ringing after that last one, but I don't think I heard any wildlife. I feel like I did not, but that might be my memories being edited by these threads. It stood on its back legs for a second or two, then fell forwards, onto its front legs. It then got up again, and took a few unsteady steps towards me. It was awkward, like if you were trying to get your dog to dance, or teaching a cat to walk on its back legs. It kinda stabilizes itself, and began walking towards me, hissing like a radio. At that point, I was a little weirded out, but I thought it might have been rabies or mad cow or something. I placed my crosshairs on its head, and squeezed the trigger. Its head was split open by the 180 grain soft point and it dropped. The shot was a little high, but the fucker was pink misted, a fact I could see on the snow around it. I figured that was that, and started to climb down from the stand when it screamed again. I flew up the steps I had descended and placed another bead on it. This one went into its throat and it fell. I placed a third round into its chest for good measure and slowly walked down. As I got closer and my ears recovered, it was still hissing and trying to move. I raised my rifle, but it died before I placed a fourth round. Looking closer, it was all kinds of fucked up. It had the thin, almost needle-like front teeth, but its back teeth were shovel-like and flat, with really thin edges. Sharp. Its front paws hand thing, elongated toes with sharp claws, while its back feet were long, wide and flat. Snout was much longer than a normal coyote, maybe 1.5 times as long, and its eyes were much larger. I told my family, and we took a hunk of spine that was exposed to send to the DNR. They tested it, and it came back negative for all common diseases. Don't know what the fuck it was. Probably a mutated coyote that bred with a dog or something, but it was strange. Glad it's dead, that's for sure. It's the strangest thing I have seen in these North Woods. Anything else abnormal about its physiology? Hell, that sounds like an interesting coyote corpse for a biologist to have gotten their hands on. It was just huge. That was the weirdest thing. It was just kinda messed up all around. Head was too big, ears too small, rat-like skinny tail. I was told about this song about a year ago and heard people talk about the Michigan Dogman. If there are more of them, I can see where the legends would come from. This started when I was a little kid, so my memory's a little spotty now, but I remember most of it. B5 or so. Family's first dog, a yellow lab named Max, died recently. He was extremely friendly and was always careful around me and my little brother. Get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom right across the hallway. Dark as shit, but there is a nightlight a little bit past the bathroom. Further down the hall, there's a corner with the door to the basement just around it. Halfway to the bathroom, I hear a dog panting happily and climbing up the stairs. I stop and look down the hallway and wait. Eventually, I see a dog come around the corner. With the nightlight, I can just barely make out the basic features, such as shape and the color of the fur. It looks exactly like Max. I just stand there watching it, not fully comprehending what I'm looking at, since I was a dinosaur nut back then and barely knew anything about ghosts. It just stand there, watching me and panting happily. Eventually, I turn on the lights to get a better look, and it disappears while I'm looking away. I go to the bathroom and go to sleep. My parents told me it was just a dream when I told them about it, but I know I was awake. This continues for the next month or so. Each time it comes from the basement and stops closer and closer to me. I never mentioned it to my parents again, since they would not believe me. After a month, it's getting really close to the nightlight, and I just sit and wait, since it walks slowly and methodically. As it comes closer and closer into the light, its features slowly change. First, its fur becomes more messy and tangled looking. Next, it starts crouching lower to the ground. I realized later that it looked like it was sneaking up on its prey. It would then start growling and snarling, baring its fangs at me and frothing at the mouth. Eventually, the eyes would turn a deep red that glowed ever so slightly. Throughout all this, I would just sit there until it stopped. Each time it stopped, it seemed like it was just outside of the light's reach, like there was a barrier between it and the light which kept getting closer each night. Despite the changes, I never got scared. It still looked roughly like Max, and being the dumb little kid I was, I thought it was him. Eventually, I would remember why I got up in the first place and turn on the lights. It would disappear each time while I looked away. The next night was the last time I ever let it get anywhere near me. That night, it finally stepped into the light. As it passes through, its fur turns pitch black, and I can see it's matted down with both fresh and dry blood. Its glowing red irises expand to cover all of the visible eyes, and the pupils disappear. It also begins barking angrily at me. Worst of all, it is not stopping. At this point, I finally come to my senses and quickly turn on the lights, not taking my eyes off of it. This time, it slowly fades away instead of immediately disappearing. I did not sleep the rest of that night and never turned off the lights. Over the next several years while we lived in that house, I could always feel it waiting for me, especially if I had to leave my room for any reason during the night. Each time, I would look down the hallway while I reached behind me to turn the lights on. Sometimes I could not see it, but could still hear it panting. Most nights I could see it waiting for me at the end of the hall, panting happily, looking and sounding just like Max. I never said a single thing to anyone about it, to this day. I don't quite know why. I just felt it would be futile. After we moved, several years later when I was 12, I stopped seeing it, but I could still sometimes hear it, and I always felt it waiting for me, just around the corner and in the dark. It has mostly stopped now, but I still sometimes feel it waiting for me, and have still kept habits that I developed after I saw it, for whatever the hell it is. To this day, I can't stand being in the dark alone for long, even if I have a strong flashlight or lamp, and I can't sleep without my door and windows closed and my bed sheets completely covering me unless someone else is in the room, all in some vain, childish attempt to protect myself if it returns, or at least not see it if it does. I still have not told anyone about this, except a close friend of mine, and I can still sometimes feel it watching me. I just hope that I have one of my guns on me with ammo if it ever does come back and I can't get away. Nothing has ever terrified me more than that thing. Pick related is my POV. Other thing was on the right side at end of tunnel bridge. Be me, 20 years old, live in a big city. Out smoking one night with a female coworker. Decide to smoke under a bridge nearby. Barely in the woods, just outside inhabited area, protected green area, no buildings around. 9 p.m. in the fall, dark outside, pitch black under the bridge. Bring an LED strip for some light. Start packing a bowl. Both take a couple hits. Notice a small light at the other end of the long tunnel bridge. Think nothing of it. 5 minutes go by. Did you hear something? No. Be quiet for a sec. Hear a whistle. Whistle back. Hear another whistle. Whistle back again. Light starts moving upwards. Look at each other like, what the fuck? Light begins bobbing slowly across the water, like someone holding it out for balance. Water is 2 to 3 feet deep. Water is freezing cold because it is fall. Rocks are slimy with algae. Pitch black all around. Start packing up our stuff as fast as we can. Light turns off right as it reaches the opposite bank. Fumbling to pack everything. Start leaving briskly. We hear a loud yell that echoes like mad through the bridge. What do? Run. I can't. I forgot. She has a sprained ankle. Fucking walk fast. Hear more noise coming from under the bridge. Help her hobble up the steep path to the top of the bridge. Finally get out to the road above. Street lamps and traffic passing by. Safety. Walk 15 minutes to McDonald's, trying to process what just happened. Still creeped out today. Definitely freaked me out. Never had my flight instincts kick in so strongly. I have no idea why they crossed the cold, deep water. No idea why they decided to hide their presence once they crossed the water. No idea why they yelled. I guess most importantly, no idea what the fuck they were doing there. Went there often as part of my walk. Never experienced anything before or since that happened. Interviewing for a job cross country. They don't pay for the hotel. Find the cheapest Airbnb I can find. Get there. Key hidden under a rock. Kinda sketchy. Welp, I'm in too deep. Get in. Barely any furniture. Holes in walls recently patched. Fresh paint in random locations. Doesn't look much like the photos online. There is also a door, which I think leads to the basement, that has literally 5 padlocks on it. Want to nope the fuck out, but poor college grad looking for a job. Feel like I'm being watched. Try to ignore it and go to sleep. Wake up needing to piss. Instead of turning the lights on, I just use my cell flashlight. Go to bathroom. Light briefly shines over the vent in the bathroom. Something reflects back the light. Huh? Grab a chair to get a closer look. It's a fucking camera. Fuck this shit. Call 911 and barricade myself in the room, waiting for them to arrive. Cops show up. Point out the camera. They investigate. Yep, it's a camera. They start checking around. Move a rug that's kinda in a weird place. Dark stains, they think they might be blood. Okay, Anon. This is a crime scene investigation now. We need you to leave. Fuck. Give the cops my contact info, get an Uber, and go to Denny's that's open 24/7. Spend the night there not sleeping at all until my interview. Don't get the job because I look like a zombie, didn't shower, and have my luggage with me, even though I explain what happened. Later, the cops contact me on the case. No leads. The info they used to set up the Airbnb account is all bogus. The LLC they used to hotel title for the house is also bogus. Asked what was behind the padlocked door. We can't divulge that information, Anon, but be glad that you called us when you did. Stay in actual, legit hotels, my fellow Anons.